One autumn morning, as the mist enveloped the distant mountains, a young man named Chris arrived in a small village. He was intelligent and ambitious, yet he always felt like something was missing in his life. Despite having read hundreds of books, attended countless seminars, and learned from the most successful people, he still couldn't find peace within himself. Chris decided to seek out a renowned Zen master who lived in seclusion high in the mountains. It was said that this master had the ability to help others find self-awareness and transform their lives. After several grueling days of climbing, Chris finally reached the small temple where the master resided. When he entered, he saw the Zen master sitting quietly, holding a cup of tea. Without waiting, Chris began pouring out his heart, sharing his struggles, failures, and everything he had learned in life. He spoke non-stop, as if trying to empty everything inside him. The Zen master remained silent, simply gazing at Chris with compassionate eyes. When Chris paused to catch his breath, the master gently set the teacup down and said, "Would you like some tea?" Chris nodded, and the master began pouring tea into the cup. But instead of stopping when the cup was full, he continued pouring. The tea overflowed, spilling onto the table and dripping onto the floor. Chris exclaimed in alarm, "Master, the cup is full. Why are you still pouring?" The Zen master smiled, looked directly into Chris's eyes and said, "This cup is like your mind. It is already too full. How can you receive anything new if your mind has no space left?" Chris sat in silence, stunned by the master's words. He realized that he had been constantly filling his mind with knowledge, experiences, and worries, never taking the time to empty it. The Zen master suggested that Chris stay at the temple for a few days to learn how to empty his mind. On the first day, Chris was asked to sit in silent meditation, but after just a few minutes, he grew restless. Thoughts about work, family, and future plans kept flooding his mind. "How can I stop thinking?" Chris asked. The master replied, "You don't need to stop thinking. Just recognize that your thoughts are like clouds passing through the sky of your mind. Don't cling to them." On the second day, Chris was tasked with sweeping leaves in the temple courtyard. The task seemed simple, but the master instructed him to focus entirely on each movement. "Feel each leaf, listen to the sound of the broom on the ground, and let your mind become still," he said. At first, Chris found the task meaningless, but gradually he realized that by focusing on the present moment, his worries about the future and the past seemed to fade away. On the third day, the master handed Chris a blank sheet of paper and told him to write down all his worries. Chris wrote non-stop, from his fears of failure to the expectations of others. Then, the master asked him to burn the paper. "Do you see? Your worries are just words on paper. They are not reality. Let them go, like the flame consuming this paper," the master said. That night, Chris dreamed he was standing by a vast river. In his hands was a cup filled with water. He clutched the cup tightly, afraid that if he poured it out, he would lose everything. But then, a voice spoke, "Pour the cup into the river. The water in the cup will merge with the river, and you will lose nothing." Chris woke up feeling an odd sense of relief. He realized that emptying his mind didn't mean giving up everything, but rather letting go of what was unnecessary to make space for new possibilities. After a week at the temple, Chris returned home with a lighter mind. He no longer tried to cram everything into his head. Instead, he learned to live in the present, listen to himself, and embrace life with an open heart. A year later, Chris returned to the temple to thank the Zen master. He shared how his life had completely changed. He no longer felt the pressure to succeed, and instead he found joy in the simple things. The Zen master smiled, poured a cup of tea, and handed it to Chris. This time, Chris's cup was not overflowing. It held just the right amount of tea, and Chris realized that this was the balance he had been searching for all along. Empty your mind doesn't mean abandoning everything, but rather letting go of unnecessary thoughts, worries, and preconceptions to create space for new and positive things. Only when our minds are empty can we truly receive the lessons, opportunities, and joys that life offers. Learn to live in the present, listen to yourself, and let your soul be free.